Hello, everybody. Um, Strategically, I'm placed when everybody's about to take a nap. All right, my name is Aman Chauhan. I'm a medical oncologist at University of Miami Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center. It's an honor to be here among all of you guys, and thank you so much, NCAN, for giving me this opportunity to discuss NET's clinical trials. Well, why do we need to talk about clinical trials? One thing that we have learned today is that the incidence of neuroendocrine cancer is on a rise. In 1970s, when we used to diagnose one case every 100,000 people, we now diagnose 8 cases per 100,000 people. In the same time frame, in the last 6 decades, 5-6 decades, the incidence of all other cancers have remained same. They have not shown multifold increase. Breast cancer, colon cancer, lung cancer. If at all, the incidence of other cancer actually reduced, while neuroendocrine tumor incidence grown 8-folds. What is even more concerning, because of the nature of neuroendocrine cancers, the prevalence of our disease far outweighs incidence. That means every year we have more and more patients added to the neuroendocrine tumor diagnosis. So right now, it's a conservative estimate. We have over 170,000 people living with diagnosis of neuroendocrine cancer in the US alone. That's a big number. And not all of these patients have early stage cancer where we can do surgery and cure them. I want to show you these survival outcomes. This is very, very new data. It's actually not even published, so you're probably among the very few people who are seeing this. This will come out very soon. It's an official publication of American Joint Cancer Committee. And what you can see here is all different subsets of neuroendocrine tumors, be it gastric, rectal, pancreas, small bowel. All these lines are different stage of neuroendocrine cancers or tumors for different subsets and 5-year survival. So all those stage 1, 2, and 3, the top 3 lines, they look very favorable with 90+% survival at 5-year after the diagnosis. The stage 4 data doesn't look that great. You see, the survival falls to 50-60% range. And this is why we need to do clinical trials. The current treatment as is, one, is not curative for metastatic disease. Second, even if it works well, it will eventually stop working. So we need to find better, smarter treatments for our patients. So what are clinical trials? Now, for today's talk, I'll focus more on oncologic or cancer clinical trials. These are research studies that test new medical interventions in patients. These tests are done to either prevent, screen for cancers, diagnose a cancer, or treat a cancer. They might compare a new treatment to already established treatment or a placebo, what we often call sugar pill. There are different types of trials, we'll come to it. The ultimate goal of a clinical trial is to determine if these treatment approaches are safe and effective. That's why whatever we practice is evidence-based. Somebody asked a question earlier about the complementary medicines and those things, right? The reason why we don't have a lot of confidence because it's not data-driven. We don't have prospective randomized trials, right? How do we know that drug X works? You can only comment about its effectiveness when you have studied it without any biases. It was a very unbiased scientific protocol. So this is the landscape of how clinical trials are done and what different phases of clinical trial. The earliest phase clinical trial of phase 1 are first in human or a completely brand new concept we were testing. And because it is higher risk, we have not had much clinical experience, we treat fewer patients. As you see, the number of participants usually 20, 30, not usually more than that. The main goal of phase 1 trial is to confirm that we can test a drug safely in our patient. But another important secondary goal is to see hints of effectiveness. We just don't want to give a treatment to a cancer patient just to prove that it can be done safely. We also want a patient to benefit from it. Once phase 1 trials are done and we know an effective and safe dose in our patients, we take it to phase 2 trials where we are able to treat a little bit larger patient volume. The goal there becomes to see what degree of benefit are we seeing in the patients. We might have a comparison with a standard treatment and then compare standard to the novel treatment. And if we see hints of efficacy there, then we take it to the ultimate and the final, which is a phase 3 trial. Once a drug proves its merit in a phase 3 trial, usually FDA would give its approval and it's available to patients in the US context, in the US and then worldwide. So that's the usual journey of how the drug development takes place and is made accessible to the patients. So from the lab to phase 1 to phase 3 is at least a 10-year journey, if not longer, right? And that's where one of the exciting parts of being involved in clinical trial is you get access to something potentially promising way before than it will be ever available in the market. There are also phase 4 trials. Those are open market trials where once the drug is available commercially, that we learn from real world use of how well the drug's working, any new signals of toxicities, etc. When you approach your provider with, hey doc, do I have clinical trial options, and they discuss trials, you want to ask few important questions. One, what type of trial? Is it an early phase trial? Is it a late phase trial? Because if it's an early phase trial, there's probably very limited data on it, but it might also be a very promising drug which is very cutting edge. Okay, so you got to have those discussions. The other question you need to ask is, what's the primary objective of the study, doc? Why are you doing the study? And that would really help you make the decision, are you a good fit for that study or not? You also want to ask secondary objectives, because if the primary objective is just to find safety signal, but the secondary objective is to also confirm that this drug works against your cancer, then that might be a reasonable, acceptable thing that you're looking for in a trial. Okay, so objectives are very important, and have a discussion about those. Few other key take-home messages regarding clinical trial participation. It is a voluntary act. You can walk out anytime. A lot of patients who come to my clinic and they discuss trial, they're worried. Hey doc, if I sign up, will your feelings be hurt if I walk out? No. At the end of the day, I'm your doctor first. I'm not a clinical trialist first, right? So if you sign today and you have a change of heart tomorrow, you can just call us, say, hey doc, I don't want to do it. Or before treatment, after cycle 1, after cycle 2, doesn't matter. You can walk out anytime without any penalties or issues, okay? So it's really a voluntary act. Regarding the cost of participation, that's another important question. So clinical trial has two components. One is called research component as a standard of care. So any clinical trial, you still need to see your doctor. You still have to do routine blood tests, CMP, CBC, blood counts, kidney functions, routine scans to monitor your disease. That you would do regardless whether you're on a trial or you're on a standard treatment. So the standard of care component is always covered by your insurance. But whatever is done in a research study which goes above and beyond a standard procedure is covered by the sponsors or the trial, whosoever sponsoring the study. So nothing really falls on the shoulders of the patients to bear. So if there are additional blood tests, additional scans, additional visits which are done primarily for the research trials, all billed to the company, not to the patient's insurance. And all of this is determined way before the trial is even active. So anytime a company comes to us and say, hey doc, are you interested in this trial? Part of our vetting process is we go through what is being covered, and we have an honest broker in the hospital who makes that decision. No, this is based on guidelines, this is covered, this is research, and the research needs to be billed to the sponsors. Each trial is very unique in its design, its intended benefit, and the patient population it caters to. So no two trials are same. So please don't compare trials. And you have to have that discussion with the trial investigators. As of today, there are probably over 40 clinical trials investigating in neuroendocrine cancer field, and nobody can know all these trials. This is what we do for a living, day in, day out, but even I don't know all these 40 clinical trials are happening. The only person who knows is the principal investigator of that trial, because also these studies are under CDA. So the studies which I'm involved in, I know the details of it. I have the full investigator brochure, protocol details. I would not know what Dr. Del Rivero's trials have the finer details of it. However, we can do a cursory review on clinicaltrials.gov, and that's a resource that I would encourage all of you guys to check out. It's a government maintained website called clinicaltrials.gov. It's a free resource. You type in your disease or the name of the drug, and then you search through every clinical trial. Human clinical trial has to be registered under it, and you'll see a lot of results. Then just like any Google search, you need to play around with the results. You gotta check off some filters. You're only looking for active trials, not one which have closed several years back. Then you're only looking for trials in the US. You're only looking for trials with XYZ criteria, and that will filter all these results and make it somewhat manageable for you, okay? They also give you contacts if you're interested in a particular clinical trial. That I seem to be a good fit for this study. This is my disease and looks like I'm interested in this. So there would be a phone number or contact. They'll also give you a list of sites that this trial is available. So if you're in San Diego and trial is in LA, you don't have to come to Miami for that same trial, right? So great resource to check it out. Always ask your provider for relevant trial options and have a discussion of risk benefits as compared to standard of care treatment, okay? So trials have some pros. You get access to a drug which has science behind it. We just don't test random drug directly in the humans. So there's a lot of preclinical science. We've tested these drugs in neuroendocrine models before we bring it to human trials. So a lot of time, effort, energy, money goes into this, but you still want to make sure, hey doc, what do you think? What are the pros and cons? Is there any clinical data? Even a little bit of data helps. And do you think this is a better option as compared to the standard of care option? What is my standard of care option? So you got to have those discussions. Because of clinical trials, we have made huge strides in how we manage neuroendocrine cancers. This is a screenshot of the drug development landscape. When I was a resident in New Orleans, I remember we only had 1 to 2 maximum good treatment options. We didn't even have PRRT, and our patients had to go to Europe to get Lutathera or PRRT. You have seen multiple FDA approvals, both for diagnosis, different type of scans, the gallium-68 scan, copper-64 scan, different drugs, been reported to have positive results. It is only possible because of clinical trials, okay? These patients who participated in trials, they were able to access these drugs, which are now available commercially today, but they were able to get to these almost a decade before in the market. With that, let me kind of start off the rest of the talk with some good news. In last 6 months itself, we have seen 3 positive studies in neuroendocrine space. This is a very exciting time for neuroendocrine oncology. One of the first studies from the recent past is the data was unveiled by Dr. Jennifer Chan from Dana-Farber at ESMO. It's a big oncology meeting in Europe. And the name of the study was called Cabinet. It's a drug called cabozantinib. It's a pill which works really well in pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors. There's some data from phase 2. So this study tested in a randomized phase 3. So neuroendocrine tumors of GI origin were randomized to either control of placebo versus the active drug called cabozantinib. And what we are seeing here is progression-free survival. So the amount of time the cancer was stable on either the drug or placebo. And the study was so resoundingly successful that they had to stop the study at the interim analysis. That means they didn't feel ethical to continue with the study because they could see clearly the patients who were on the study drug did better. So these are the checks and balances done in the trial to make it ethical, because we don't want to continue to not treat patients, right? So this is a really good addition in our armamentarium to treat NETs patient. It's not FDA approved yet. I'm not sure. Those are decisions that are way above my pay grade. But at least this drug is commercially available for other cancers, and I've started using it in my practice in the right patient. So at least this is available commercially and can be done as of now as off-label, but I'm really hoping that very soon we will have consensus guidelines and other recommending that use of cabozantinib is another tool, okay? The next study is hot off the press. The data revealed 2 weeks back at GI ASCO in San Francisco. This name of study is called NETTER-2. You've all heard about Lutathera, the PRRT, how it works, etc. This is the first study which tested PRRT in frontline setting. And what we see here is patients who got PRRT or Lutathera, the top blue line, did exceedingly well. The median PFS, I think, was 23 months as compared to a single-digit median PFS in the control arm, which was high-dose SSA. Again, another home run by one of our PRRT agents. This is, however, a unique neuroendocrine tumor patient population. These are higher grade 2 and grade 3 well-differentiated neuroendocrine tumors. So these are a little bit more aggressive neuroendocrine tumors, and it is justified to use PRRT upfront, and this study proves that. So this is another runaway success. Last but not the least, and I'm personally involved in this study, so I'm very, very excited. It was the data is not yet presented. It will be presented at a meeting called ENETS in Europe, in Vienna, in March. However, there's a press release, so it's in public domain. It's a drug called paltusotine. It's an oral pill. It's a somatostatin analog. Now, how many of you guys are on injections, or sandostatin, lanreotide? Quite a few, right? I don't know about you, but I'm not a huge fan of needles. It's a great drug, but for people like me who are scared of needles, we were always hoping to develop an oral alternative of the same class of drug. So paltusotine is a pill form of somatostatin analog, and what this study tells us is the patient who were on paltusotine showed significant improvement in their carcinoid diarrhea, carcinoid flushing. You can see the numbers there is a 60+% reduction. So very promising phase 2 data. It's a positive study. And then time will tell us if and how this drug evolves. I'm expecting a phase 3 study. That would be a logical next step. So again, this is how we make incremental progress in any field. You know, we have new drugs, new agents, more options for our patients. So this is how we classify neuroendocrine cancer. It's not one disease, it's a complex set of cancers, right? It's broadly neuroendocrine tumors, neuroendocrine carcinomas. For today's talk, I'll just focus on neuroendocrine tumors, NETs. And we won't not go towards very aggressive neuroendocrine carcinomas, okay? My rest of the talk, I don't know how much time I'm left, maybe 10 minutes, I'll try to wrap up without going into too much detail, what is the ongoing studies, right? So you've seen some of the recently concluded studies and the progress we've made in last decade, but what's happening, what gets me excited about the new drug development, what are some of the promising agents in development right now? So PRRT has really taken our field by the storm. We have a lot of really interesting PRRT studies. This is a national multi-center study by my good friends, Dr. Soares and Habde, is testing a drug, Lutathera, which most of you know by now, and comparing it to CAPE-10 in pancreatic neuroendocrine tumor. So we are in an era where we have so many multiple options. Now we want to compare which option is better, because that's how we will know if I have a patient with pancreatic NET and who has progressed on somatostatin analog, should I do CAPE-10 first or should I do PRRT first? So this study will help us navigate those questions. There's another study which is by our good friend Dr. Tom Ho from UCSF, studying role of PRRT in lung nets. Right now, the lung nets patients are not covered by PRRT. Although we use it, we know it works, there's a lot of retrospective data, but this is the first study that will test and hopefully prove to us that PRRT works equally well for neuroendocrine tumor of lung origin if they express somatostatin receptors. And then there are other studies. There's a very interesting industry study that is looking into another novel PRRT agent called lutetium-177 edotriotide and comparing it to the current standard of care. So again, more options, better for our patients. We're no longer going to have access to just one drug called Lutathera. We are very happy that there are more players and that they're evaluating their drugs. Another PRRT agent that you might have heard of called alpha PRRT, right? So all the other agents we discussed so far are lutetium based, so they emit beta ionizing radiation. Alpha PRRT is another form of radiation. It's a higher energy of radiation and the depth is shorter. So it has some benefits that it can potentially cause double-stranded DNA break as compared to beta ionizing radiation, which theoretically only causes single-stranded DNA breaks. And also, since the depth of penetration is not large as compared to beta ionizing, the idea is it might not be as toxic as beta. So those are theoretical benefits. However, there are some concerns about safety in the kidneys and long-term bone marrow effects, etc. Preliminarily, the early phase studies does show that the alpha PRRT agent seems to be very effective and tremendous amount of objective responses. This is one of the patients from the radiomedic study, so tumor is completely gone. So the amount of complete responses or disease shrinkage is significantly higher than the conventional beta PRRT agents. So there are some alpha PRRT agents being developed. Not only adult patients, we are also seeing PRRT being investigated in pediatric trials. I was involved in it when I was in Kentucky, and we are eagerly awaiting its results as well. So our pediatric NET patients will also hopefully have access to some treatment options. Then what about the patients who've been through PRRT? Because we know it works very well. I'm not going to go over the PRRT data. You've heard in the morning. It's a really important tool for us to fight NETs. But let's suppose I have a patient. And the patient tells me, Doc, I got PRRT in 2019, had a good 3 or 4 years. Now the cancer is finally growing. The automatic question is, can I try it again? It worked so well. 4 doses, it kept my disease stable for a few years. I have no issues, no side effects. Can I try it again? Theoretically, yes, you can try it again. There are few issues. One, FDA approval for Lutathera is only for 4 doses. So there's a chance that your insurance might not pay for it the second time. Secondly, we have to yet prove that it can be done safely. Although we have at least 13 to 14 studies from Europe that have shown us that it is very safe to re-challenge or retreat patients with Lutathera or similar PRRT agents, but there's never been a prospective randomized study. So we are doing a one of its kind international study where US and Canada, CCTG, and US group called SWOG, we are collaborating to test this hypothesis that we can safely re-challenge PRRT. A PRRT is donated or funded by Novartis, so we don't really need to worry about how we'd get access to the drug. And if this study is positive, then hopefully we'll have more data in support of that patient should and can get more PRRT, and hopefully that'll convince the payers to cover that. So it's an important study in our field. There's also another important study that is currently enrolling, and this is again for patients who've been through PRRT already, and this study is investigating alpha PRRT in PRRT refractory setting. Okay, so this is an actinium-based PRRT agent, patients who've already been to Lutathera, and will test if it can benefit those patients who've already been and progressed through Lutathera. So as you can see, a lot of really interesting studies happening. So PRRT is now the mainstream. Next generation of PRRT studies are looking at how can we make these PRRT agents even better. If PRRT on an average is able to stabilize the neuroendocrine tumor for 28, 29 months, can we make it 40, 50 months? On an average, based on the drug insert, label insert of Lutathera, if PRRT is able to shrink the tumors only in 14% of cases, can we make it 30, 40% of the cases? So we are shooting for a higher goals, and next generation of studies are combining PRRT with novel promising drugs. One of my friends in Seattle is testing a drug called cabozantinib, which we just shown works good even on its own. They're combining cabozantinib with PRRT. So very interesting phase 1 study currently happening. Other studies by our own Dr. Del Rivera from NIH here, they are testing olaparib, another DNA damaging agent, the PARP inhibitor, combining it with PRRT. And we are eagerly awaiting to hear their phase 1 data as well. And then I'll finish off my talk with some of the trials that we are doing at Miami and leading nationally. This is a drug called triapine, was originally designed and discovered in Yale, and we tested in our neuroendocrine models when we added triapine to culture plates with neuroendocrine cells and radiated those cells. The cells with higher triapine died faster, stayed in remission longer, and that's what that shows. Those are the mouse data. When you see the triapine arm, the tumor growth was completely stagnated. Now, we tested this concept in humans. The phase 1 study was designed with the help of NCI funding. So all of you and my taxpayer dollars are going to this. And I'm very happy to announce that in 3 years, we were able to wrap up, actually a little longer than 3 years, from preclinical, from lab to completion of phase 1. We presented our data last year at AACR. And just as we had expected, one, the key goal was, can it be done safely without hurting the patients? We treated about 30 patients. So we were able to find a safe dose, but more importantly, we wanted to see hints of benefit, right? Otherwise, why are we even doing this? So preliminarily, we have almost doubled the response rate as compared to single Lutathera. So adding of this pill, triapine, to Lutathera seems to be promising. And we are now doing a randomized phase 2. This study is currently enrolling in almost 15 different sites in the US, and more centers are kind of opening this study. So you can see a lot of enthusiasm. It's open in MD Anderson, Northwestern, University of Kentucky, University of Miami. We are certainly the lead site currently in enrolling, but you have access to this study in a lot of different centers, and there's a lot of excitement. So this phase 2 is studying triapine plus Lutathera versus Lutathera. And this study would tell us if there is benefit in adding triapine to Lutathera in terms of disease control rate. So very, very exciting study. We are also studying a lot of science and newer biomarkers, newer blood tests to monitor the disease. One of them is called HPG80, which we feel is far more superior than chromogranin, right? Very, very inaccurate way to monitor the disease. So we are testing a lot of really innovative science in these trials, and hopefully we have more ways to monitor the cancer than just scans. Last study that I like to highlight before I conclude is a very new drug called M3814. When I first started working with this drug, it was designed and developed in Germany by German Merck, and US is being investigated by EMD Serrano, that's the name of company. So it's a DNA protein kinase inhibitor. So how does PRRT work? When you get Lutathera injection, it goes into your blood, latches onto your neuroendocrine tumor cells through somatostatin receptor. Since it's radioactive, it radiates the cell and causes breaks in the DNA of cancer cell. If the DNA is damaged, the cancer cell dies. In fact, any living cell dies from radiation because it causes breaks in DNA. Then you might ask me, Doc, why does the cancer cell survive? Why does the tumor start growing back again after several months or years, right? Because cancer cell is also trying to fight. They're trying to survive. One of the ways they try to survive is by repairing their damaged DNA. And what we figured out is one of the main culprit enzyme that helps cancer cell repairs DNA is called DNA protein kinase. So the company, once they figured that out, they developed a drug to block that enzyme. So makes perfect sense. So you give PRRT where it's causing DNA damage, and then you give the pill which blocks the DNA repair, so it should work very complementary. And we sort of proved that in our animal models. This is a human pancreatic neuroendocrine tumor cell line models, and you can see M3814 did a good job as a radiation sensitizer. Later on, we tested it in first-in-human phase 1 study. I'm very happy to tell you that as of last month, we enrolled the final patient on this study. So this study is no longer taking more patients, and now we're going to evaluate how well it's working and then take the next steps of hopefully phase 2. We preliminarily were able to tell that this is safe. We found the safe phase 2 dose. But before we go further, we also wanted to see how beneficial it will be in terms of efficacy. With that, I would like to thank for your attention, and we will take some questions later. Thank you.